Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on wellbeing at work. My name is Marissa Sanders. I head up the early careers team here at Irwin Mitchell. What I'd like to do, first of all, is to just give you an introduction, an overview as to what we're going to cover today. So the webinar will be split. Firstly, we'll have an overview and an introduction to Irwin Mitchell, which I will cover. We'll then go on to advice and personal experiences. So we've got two of our current trainees on. We've got Micah, who's in our business legal services division, and we've got Claire, who is in our personal legal services division. So they'll give you an overview of their experiences and some tips as well. And we'll then go on to, we've got a couple of our partners here. We've got Ariana Griffiths, who's a partner in the medical negligence team in our London office, and Tom, who is a partner in our restructuring and insolvency office in Sheffield. So all of the speakers will be talking about wellbeing, and they'll share some of their personal experiences as well. We talk about DNA at Irwin Mitchell, and it is in our DNA to value people for who they are and for what they can bring to the business, and we ensure that we do have a culture that is supportive for all of our colleagues. So if you can go on to the next slide, please, Lisa. So this is a little bit about Irwin Mitchell. So we are legal and financial advisors with offices across 15 locations in the UK. So we are what's known as a national law firm. So you can get some city-based law firms, some rural firms, high street firms, but we come under the category of a national law firm, which means that you can undertake a training contract in different offices around the country. So we do have an international presence as well, although we don't have any offices abroad. We are a member of First Law International, which helps us work with preferred partners abroad. We are a full service law firm as well. This is something which is important to know when you're considering which law firms to apply to. So some concentrate specifically on a particular area, such as family law. Other firms concentrate on commercial. A lot of the well-known firms are commercially based, dealing mainly with businesses. But we're what you call a full service law firm, which means that we can advise clients on any matter. So we can advise somebody on a personal issue. We could also advise them on their business. We can advise on tax, wealth, all different areas, which I'll come on to in a minute. We're made up of a number of separate businesses, which enables us to offer a broad range of expertise to our clients, all with the same commitment to providing an expert hand with a human touch. So that's a strapline that you will have probably been familiar with if you've seen our TV adverts or you've seen our brochure. And what that means is that we do have a significant number of experts in their field. So clients can come to us with the confidence that they are being advised by experts, but it's all about that human touch as well, which is really important to Irwin Mitchell. So a few things to highlight from this slide. We've helped over 1 million clients in our history. You can see it says that we were established in 1912, so we've been going for a long period of time. Again, something to bear in mind when you're looking at different law firms, because you want a firm that's going to be around during and beyond your training contract. So you want a firm that does have that longevity. Another thing that's important to us is the Irwin Mitchell Charities Foundation, and over the course of having this charity foundation established, we've raised over £2 million for the various charities that we support. We are a high-ranking law firm. We're in the Best Law Firms of 2020 by the Times. We've won numerous awards, including the Diversity Award at the Signature Awards in 2020. One of the things that is important to us, and it does link into the wellbeing aspect, is the diversity networks that we have in all of our offices. So we have a number of different diversity networks, which I will just highlight in a moment. But in addition, and again linking to the wellbeing aspect, we have over 100 healthy mind advocates in the business who have been trained by Mental First Aid England to support our colleagues. Next slide, please, Lisa. So one of the things that is really important to us at Irwin Mitchell is understanding, sorry, I think it's the slide previous to that one, Lisa, it's the, thank you, is understanding our colleagues. So we understand that people's situations are different, and we do try to adapt our approach to suit the individuals. We've got a strategy known as the 3 Cs, which is around our clients, communities, and colleagues. So from a client's point of view, clients are our #1 priority, and we want to give them the best advice possible. That's at the forefront of everything that we do. And communities is also important. We've got a long history of you being really well involved in the communities that we operate. That could be supporting clients at home or in the business community, or it could be working with charitable organisations and institutions in the community. And of course, the other part that underpins this is our colleagues. We couldn't do what we do without our talented colleagues. We've got a diverse range of clients, and we've got a diverse range of colleagues as well. We're passionate about creating a welcoming and inclusive environment for everyone. So the next slide, please, Lisa. So now I'm just going to give you an overview. When you apply for a training contract at Irwin Mitchell, you choose either the business or the personal legal services stream, which you will specialise in. So the business legal services is the fastest growing area of the firm, with an increasing number of global, national and regional companies choosing to work with us in what is a highly competitive market. So we've got different areas of the business where you could undertake a seat, which they're all listed there on that screen. So for example, banking and finance. In that seat, you would be providing advice to lenders, borrowers and intermediaries on a wide variety of financial related issues. Commercial area is one that looks at legal documents and supports the business in their everyday operations and contracts. You've then got the corporate area, which anybody who watches Suits may think that this is what this is like. Well, it is dealing with those sorts of deals, but not necessarily in the same manner. So this includes expertise in areas such as mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, management buyouts, corporate governance, those sort of areas. Areas such as employment, we provide a cutting-edge service and pragmatic advice on HR best practices to both businesses and individuals. Litigation is a big part of BLS, and we've got a campaign at the moment around leading litigators. So this is around providing a wide advice in a wide range of commercial litigation matters with alternative dispute resolution methods as well, such as mediation, arbitration and adjudication. So we act for both individuals and businesses in that area as well. Pensions, another area where we provide advice to on pensions related issues to pension schemes rather than individuals, and specific pension projects that we get involved with there. Real estate's an area that's probably familiar to people. So we provide a full real estate practice, which covers areas such as planning, environment, construction, property litigation, real estate finance and tax expertise as well. So again, a very broad area. We've then got a regulatory investigations group, which is a very niche area which looks at white collar crime, so regulatory issues and supporting people in that area. And then we've got restructuring and insolvency, where we provide support and advice to insolvency practitioners, lenders, surveyors and businesses as well. Okay, next slide please, Lisa. So then we've got our personal legal services area. So this is the area where we're possibly best known for at Irwin Mitchell. This is our biggest area of practice as well. It's our personal injury practice, as well as our private wealth offering. So private wealth covers areas such as family law, residential property, tax, trust and estate planning, as well as will, trust and estate disputes. So looking at the different areas of practice there, some will probably be more familiar to you than others. So Court of Protection is an area. So the Court of Protection is the area which is the judicial body which can make decisions about people's property, financial affairs and personal welfare. So these are people who don't have capacity to make decisions for themselves. So the court can appoint us to manage those affairs for them. And that links in with the personal injury aspect of the firm and was built on from that. So the cases that we deal with can mean that our clients receive a significant sum of money as a settlement for a case, but they may not have the mental capacity to manage that money. So the Court of Protection will manage that for them. The next, excuse me, the next area is family law. So again, that's something that you'll probably be familiar with. We provide a range of services in family law, such as civil partnership and same-sex marriage advice, child custody disputes, access and maintenance, as well as the usual divorce advice. We also get involved in interesting areas such as assisted reproduction and surrogacy. So family law is much more than your traditional divorce advice. We've also got an international serious injury practice within, excuse me, within the firm. So these are people who have suffered an accident or illness abroad, and it covers a range of different issues, from somebody maybe having an accident while they're on holiday to events such as the Sousse terrorist attack in Tunisia, where we are representing the families of people who were involved with that. Medical negligence, that's that's one of our largest areas of practice, and we handle medical negligence claims for people who suffered an illness or an injury as a result of substandard care in any medical setting. So that could include a GP, hospital or a dentist. A lesser known area is Ministry of Defence. So this area provides advice to injured service personnel and their families on a wide range of issues, from personal injury and armed forces compensation scheme claims, as well as inquests and criminal injuries compensation claims. So motor is another large area of practice. This isn't something that you would do as a trainee, but we do act for major insurers and policyholders in respect of personal injury claims arising from road traffic accidents. Public law is another significant area that people are often interested in doing a seat in. And this is to help clients who feel that their rights aren't being respected. These are the sort of cases that are often in the news, involving challenging local authorities or NHS bodies or even central government bodies. So a really interesting area of law. You've then got residential property, which again is something which most people are familiar with. That's the buying and selling of any sort of property or property portfolio as part of our private wealth division. So these are high net worth clients who often have substantial property portfolios, as well as the standard conveyancing services on individual properties. So again, a broad range of work in that area. And then in addition to the international serious injury area of practice, we have the standard serious injury, which is to represent clients in the UK who have sustained brain, spinal and serious orthopaedic injuries, including things such as limb amputations and cases arising out of fatal accidents. So it's not the slips, trips and falls, it is significant life-changing events that we deal with. In the private wealth area, we've also got something which is known as WTED, so that's will, trust and estate disputes. So this is where things go wrong. This is where people are seeking advice because they don't believe that things have been managed in a fair way with regard to wills, estates and the way that the trusts are being managed. And then the last area is workplace injury, which also encompasses asbestos related disease, and this area deals with a variety of workplace related claims regarding injuries in the workplace, as well as cases such as mesothelioma, which is cancer as a result of exposure to asbestos. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the two areas of business that you would undertake a training contract in. So the next slide, please, Lisa. So on to the topic of wellbeing, which is the main area of today's call. So as I've said earlier, we aim to provide a culture of openness and support for all of our colleagues, both physical and mental wellbeing. And we are involved with charters such as the Mindful Business Charter, the Mindful Employer Charter, and suicide prevention. So as a trainee, you would have regular conversations with your team and your supervisor on a day-to-day basis, asking how you're doing. But there are also lots of other colleagues that are looking out for you. As I mentioned earlier, we've got healthy mind advocates in the business who have been trained as mental health champions by Mental Health First Aid England. We also have a wellbeing hub on the intranet, which provides a huge amount of resource for our colleagues to access, covering things such as mental, physical and financial wellbeing, so a broad range there as well. I talked earlier about the diversity networks that we have at Irwin Mitchell, and those are in place to reflect the society and the clients that we serve. And we are committed and we're really proud of these diversity groups that we've got, that people can be a part of, either because they relate to that particular group or they're an ally to that particular group. So there are a number of them. I will go through each of them just very quickly, just to give you a highlight. So we've got I Am Equal. They all start with I Am. So we've got I Am Equal, which raises awareness for gay, lesbian, bisexual and transgender employees and clients. So that's I Am Equal. We've got I Am Powered, which focuses on promoting gender equality and issues that happen outside of work, such as caring responsibilities and family makeup. We've then got I Am Respect, which is around raising awareness for cultural and ethnic diversity. So that's I Am Respect. We've also got I Am Aspiring, which is something that the Early Careers team supports specifically, which is looking at social mobility in helping people get into work. We've got I Am Able, which is to provide greater support for people with disabilities. And the last one is I Am Age, which focuses on issues relating to age, so different things that may happen throughout people's life cycle. So those are the main areas that we cover through the different specific groups that we've got. We've also got the registered charity, Irwin Mitchell Charities Foundation, which, as I mentioned earlier, has made over £2 million in charitable contributions through various means. One of the things that you are able to do is you're given 2 volunteering days a year where you can go off and spend that time with a charity of your choice to support our local communities. What else have we got on this slide? Social activities. So normally when we're in the office, there are monthly office lunches to encourage networking, Fizzy Fridays, summer and Christmas parties, quiz nights. But of course, all of that is being done virtually now because colleagues are working from home. But we do still have lots of virtual events going on, such as team quizzes and coffee mornings, office bingo, and a diversity book club as well. Learning and mentoring, so learning and development on there. So before you start your training contract with us, you're allocated a current trainee as your buddy. So they will be able to answer any questions that you've got and will be your go-to person. We also normally arrange events for you to come into the office, meet the trainees. We have a seat induction evening, which really sort of introduces you to the different seats on offer before you're asked your preferences. Alongside all the on-the-job learning that you do, you will undertake the professional skills course, which is part of the training that the SRA say must be completed, and that builds on the existing knowledge from the studies that you've done, and it develops your professional skills as well, which are relevant to you qualifying as a solicitor. Salary and benefits, if you go on the website, all the salary and benefits are all detailed there. You're paid a salary as a trainee, which is then uplifted when you become qualified. There are additional number of benefits there, such as holidays and pensions, sports team sponsorship, funding towards your GDL and your LPC as well, if you haven't already undertaken those by the time you receive a training contract offer from us. Okay, so next slide, please, Lisa. Okay, well, you'll be pleased to know that after that whistle-stop tour of Irwin Mitchell, I'm going to hand over to a couple of our trainees now. So we've got Micah from BLS and Claire from PLS. So Micah, if I could hand over to you, please.
Yeah, sure. Can everybody see and hear me okay? Okay, glad to hear that. So just to introduce myself, so my name is Micah Hall. I am obviously a career changer, as you might have guessed. I went to the University of Portsmouth in 2015, graduated in 2018, and I was lucky enough to get my training contract with IM in my second year at university, which was fantastic. And I have joined last August and done, so I'm on my third seat now. So my first seat was real estate, second seat was commercial litigation, and now I'm in restructuring and insolvency, and that's a really enjoyable place to be. The really good thing from an IM point of view about joining as a trainee is that there is all kinds of work available to you. Being a full service law firm, we've got clients who are perhaps quite small, who deal with quite small and discrete matters, and then we've got cases that end up in the Supreme Court, and we've got one of my fellow trainees was writing a series of documents for a £1 billion loan facility recently. So basically there's a whole wide range of work, and that's what I was looking for. In terms of my previous career, I've worked for a number of different major IT firms, and so I was a manager of service managers, so where they would manage the relationship with big clients. I would be ultimately responsible for those relationships, and if things were going wrong or when we needed to renew the contract, then it was my job to go in and talk to the client, make sure that they were going to renew or to resolve any problems. But as I say, I've worked for a number of different firms in the IT service delivery field, and what Marissa said about suits I think was a really interesting point, because I've worked for companies that have been really had a great culture and been a really great place to work, and then have been acquired and have brought in a completely different culture. And that culture of toxic masculinity and fear-based management that you see in shows like Suits is, I would say that it's really important that you look at what you're looking for from a law firm, because you need that supportive culture to bring out the best you that there's going to be. If you're going to work in that kind of environment, your life is going to be a fairly miserable place to be. So what I would say is that the first thing that I would say that I've learned over my entire career, but particularly since joining IM, that's reinforced it, is you should only really want to work somewhere where you're going to be able to enjoy it, because otherwise it will bleed into your life. You need to have that element of work-life balance. You still need to be you. You still need to have your outside interests. You still need to be able to have your outlets and have quality relationships and other things in your life. So I've got children, and I needed to be somewhere, working somewhere where my work-life balance was genuinely respected, and I could also be there for my children and my family. And it could not be more respectful of that, the need to maintain that balance. which is important to me because my work is obviously important to me, my career is important to me, and I've changed careers because I wanted to be more challenged and I wanted to be able to stretch myself and achieve what had been my lifelong ambition. But equally, I've got responsibilities and I've got other areas of my life. I think I suffer from adult ADHD, which makes me kind of a different kind of person. Again, IM is very, very respectful of the need to have people who are neurodiverse, and they've provided me with the most excellent levels of support. I couldn't speak highly enough of them. And I think that brings me back to the point about the sort of management and the supportive environment that you have when you work, is that actually without that support, I've gone through my life hiding my ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until, much later in life, comparatively recently. So I've had to hide the fact that in some ways I am different, and it can be very stressful for me doing things like, ordinary routine tasks and concentrating on some things that I don't perhaps find so exciting. So in a previous job, I was the duty manager for an organisation on the day of the 7/7 bombings, and there were 400 people we had working for us in London that I had to try and locate and try and get them out and get them safe. We still had clients running major critical infrastructure that had to be kept working, so we had to find out ways of doing that. That sort of situation I'm great in because it's adrenaline. But if there's a situation that just involves a huge amount of admin, maybe I find that a bit more difficult to do. So I need support with that, and IM have been absolutely great with that. And I think that the one thing that I would say that most law students that I've particularly met, or people who want to go into law, is you're probably the sort of person that brings enough pressure on yourself. You probably spend a lot of your time worrying about achieving the right sort of grades, or am I going to get a training contract? Will I be able to make it when I get into the firm? Will it be incredibly difficult? That sort of pressure is hard enough to bear without working in an environment that is not there to support you. So have a look very carefully at the sort of firm that you're considering joining. Talk to the trainees and talk to them about and get their experiences in sessions like this. And I would say that from that sort of perspective, IM could not be a better place to work. They've really been incredibly supportive to me, and there's a whole world of people and supervisors who go out of their way to make sure that I'm not bringing any more pressure on myself than I already do. So I hope that's what everybody wanted to hear from me. So I'll hand over to Claire.
Hello. So I'm Claire. I'm a second year trainee in the Personal Legal Services Division. I'm currently in the International Serious Injury Department in our London office. Previously I worked in medical negligence and also the Serious Injury Department. So I'm also from a non-law background. I studied English language and literature at the University of Oxford. I then worked in publishing for a bit before deciding that law looked more interesting. So I went to work as a paralegal at another firm. I specialised in criminal defence and civil actions against the police. I then moved to Owen Mitchell to our public law department, and that was before I got a training contract here. So regarding wellbeing, I completely agree with Micah that it's really important to work somewhere where you know that you can be happy and that you're not going to be stressed about who you might be as a person and how that interacts with your work. I also agree that Owen Mitchell is really good at supporting neurodiversity. We have a lot of people in quite senior positions who are quite open about mental health conditions they might be living with or any other aspects of neurodiversity, and that's really useful and inspiring to see as a junior colleague because it makes you feel more comfortable, I think, about whoever you might be. I personally live with mental health conditions, and it's really important to me to be able to be open and honest about that with my managers and my colleagues when I want to be. As Micah was saying, it reduces the stress of trying to hide them. it can take up a lot of your sort of mental energy if you're trying to be someone that you're not. Whereas if you're in an environment like I'm lucky enough to be in at Irwin Mitchell, where I'm allowed to be myself and I can then reach my full potential, and that's really important. Like any health condition, it sometimes requires adjustments from me or from my employer. So being able to talk about that in an honest way is just very helpful. I think it's no surprise to anyone that mental health has been quite difficult during the lockdown period in particular. I think particularly if you have anxiety, it's been a perfect storm of really bad news on the TV and isolation from your support networks and the things that might normally distract you from that. So it's been even more important to have a supportive workplace, such as we're lucky enough to have at Irwin Mitchell. And also, I think it's important to remember that the legal world can be quite tough to work in. It's really interesting. It's really stimulating. You get to work with great people and you get to help people. All of that's great, but it can also be stressful. You have deadlines. You can have a lot of work to do in a very short amount of time to a high standard. So you need to be confident that your mental health and your well-being is not going to suffer as a result of that. Which brings me on to speak a bit about the support we have at Irwin Mitchell. Luckily, we've got quite a lot. We talk about well-being and mental health a lot here. We really try and break down the stigma that surrounds it sometimes. We have lots of communications, whether that's on a local office level or firm-wide. We also have a lot of people who are very engaged in the issues. So people in our HR team, our senior leadership talk about it a lot. We also have lots of groups of colleagues in different offices. I'm, for example, very involved in the London group, and we sort of gather feedback to pass back to HR obviously on a confidential basis. We hold local awareness events. In January, before the lockdown, we had a big event in the evening where we invited local businesses who specialised in anything relating to wellbeing and mental health to come in. And we had some drinks, we played table tennis. We just, it was a chance for people to sort of find out about what was available to them in a really relaxed environment. We also have the diversity groups, which have been mentioned already. And my colleague and friend, Samantha Leung, and I recently set up a diversity book club, which is open to everyone in the firm. We send out titles once a month based on the different diversity topics, and then we meet up over Zoom to discuss them. And we've had some really good discussions coming out of that, including one on mental health a couple of months ago. So it's just a nice environment to further those discussions. All of our one-to-ones with our managers have a wellbeing focus, so there's always a prompt to check in with how you're doing. And I know the Wellbeing Hub has already been mentioned by Marissa, but I just thought I'd talk a little bit more about it because it's a really great resource. And I think it really shows how seriously Irwin Mitchell takes mental health and wellbeing support. So the hub on the internet, it gathers together a lot of the support that we offer, which is things like a 24/7 telephone counselling service, which can also refer you to face-to-face counselling if you need that. Unfortunately, that's not obviously possible at the moment, but that is normally something that's offered. There's a dedicated bereavement helpline for people who need support with that. There's free online services such as cognitive behavioural therapy and meditation and mindfulness sessions. We have our Healthy Mind advocates who are in every office, and as Marissa said, those are colleagues who've been specially trained to support and signpost colleagues with anything that might be on their mind, whether it's something affecting mental health, whether it's just a general wellbeing chat because someone's feeling a bit down or just wants to vent or whatever it is. It's just having that non-judgmental network of people who can help. We also have our health insurance, which includes a digital GP app, so you can always talk to a doctor if you need to. And we have lots of events and speakers. Some really inspirational people have come in to talk about mental health and how it's affected them, how they've overcome challenges. We have colleague stories on the internet where people have shared their own experiences. And we also have line manager toolkits so that people can support their teams with whatever's going on in their mental health. We also have lots of things like volunteering, pro bono, charity, gym memberships. There's been an art class running recently where we can log on and doodle for a bit after work. So there's lots to support you outside of the 9 to 5. So that's sort of what we do at Irwin Mitchell. I've also been asked to share any advice that I'd wish I'd known at the start of my career. And I think for this, there's probably 2 things I'd say. The first one would be to take everything as a learning experience. So don't get put off if things are difficult. Don't struggle through things thinking that you're the only person who would not understand what's going on. Everyone's been there. We've all sat there in front of a screen and wondered what on earth is going on. Just ask someone. Everyone's friendly here. Everyone's happy to help. And it'll help you learn from that experience. It'll make you a better lawyer. And also, the other piece of advice I'd like to pass on is a friend sent me a photo recently that's been doing around on the internet, which is particularly COVID related, but I think applies to everything, which just said, go easy on yourself. You're doing great. This is just really hard. I think that's a good thing to bear in mind sometimes. So that's everything from me. I will hand back.
Hi there. I think where I take off from here. So my name is Tom Payton. I'm a partner in restructuring and insolvency within BLS. I'm based in the Sheffield office, although I've not actually been in the office for many months now. And a bit about sort of my career history today. I have only ever really had a career in the law. I went to the University of Sheffield. I grew up in Essex, down south, but I went to the University of Sheffield to do an undergrad degree. And I, like a lot of people, I sort of fell in love with the city, and I really enjoyed being here. I felt that I was probably going to gravitate back down towards London for a career in the law. But I did, whilst I was on my my LPC, I did have some contact with Irwin Mitchell through their grad recruitment team, who still have very close contact with the students at the university to this day. And I got a training contract at Irwin Mitchell. I had the option of doing it in London or in Sheffield, or indeed the other offices, and I chose to do it in Sheffield. And then, long story short, the recession hit, and I ended up going into insolvency, which, as you can imagine, was quite busy around that time. And I've stayed at the firm ever since. And I've sort of subsequently grown to lead a team, and that team has grown in size quite a bit, and we've got a really exciting future ahead with that. My personal experiences of well-being, well, I suppose what I'd like to do is share a story, a specific story. You're going to hear quite a lot of general examples, and I'm just going to share something that's sort of more specific to me. So one of my colleagues who's been with us at the firm for many years, longer than I have indeed, she's had a really tough time in recent years. She's very close to her parents, and unfortunately her father died a couple of years ago. It was a fairly traumatic experience because of the prolonged nature of it. He had a brain tumour, and she was caring for her father through much of that time. So she was doing her Irwin Mitchell job, and she was also acting as a carer in the background for him. They had to have the house redeveloped so he could be downstairs and various things installed. And then no sooner had that happened, and unfortunately her father passed away, her mother then had to go for an operation which was meant to be a routine heart bypass, and unfortunately she had a massive stroke. And her mother then after that has, for a couple of years, basically the same thing. My colleague has had to care for her mother, and unfortunately her mother has passed away as well. It's been an extremely traumatic time to have two close members of the family to go like that, and also especially when you're trying to juggle a job with it at the same time, and a lot of the family are relying on you for support. And what has Irwin Mitchell done around that? Well, Irwin Mitchell's been brilliant. And when I say Irwin Mitchell, although I'm her line manager, I really mean Irwin Mitchell in a wider sense. So what we did for Claire, for my colleague, was to put in place a flexible working pattern initially. So when she was giving care to her mother and her father, she wasn't always able to work full time. But we put something in place where she could be quite flexible with that, and it didn't necessarily have to be full-time, that she was sort of part-time. It could be partial, or we could react to it. So we did that, and we've also then had a period of time where she has gone down to part-time hours, and we've been very supportive and flexible throughout that. And more recently, actually said, well, she wants to work full time because actually she wants to be engaged, she enjoys the job, and she wants to really have something to keep her mind occupied as much as possible. So we've reacted to that, and she's gone back to full time. Around that as well, Claire has had the support of various support teams at Irwin Mitchell. We've got occupational health, we've got mental health advocates within the firm, and that's all been there. She's also had the benefit of people from other teams, not just HR, but sort of like a buddy system, where maybe if it's not, you can't get all the support you need off HR or your line manager, you can engage with a colleague, perhaps someone in a completely different team. And it's just something where someone can sort of offload their thoughts in a really sort of honest and open way and not feel judged in any way. And I think it's been really useful. So really going through 2 really traumatic experiences like that, it could easily have ended up in a situation where she felt she couldn't stay at the firm, but because the firm's been so flexible and listened to what she needs and put in plans to work around that, she's come out the other end, and she's done incredibly well. But she's stayed at IM, and we're very lucky to have her because she's a great colleague, and it was worth that, you know, just to support her through that alone, aside from just on a personal level, her being a friend and us wanting to support her. So that's a sort of very specific example of a well-being thing that's been on my radar recently. And then moving on to advice that we wish we'd had when we'd started our career. The thing for me, I think, is that it's very tempting for anyone who's applying for training contracts, or even when they've got training contracts, to think that they have to sort of say up front at the beginning, well, I want to be this. I know exactly what I want to be. I've always wanted to be, I don't know, a public law lawyer, or I've always wanted to be a commercial litigator. You don't have to be like that. Some people do, some people are, and they've known maybe through university what they wanted to do, and they go on to do that, and that's great. But I think a lot of people, maybe the majority, they don't really have that idea, and if they do, it's maybe a bit of a thing where they're forced to sort of give that indication. There's nothing wrong in having an open mind about what you want to do. And some of the success stories that I've seen at this firm, and I'm talking about people in senior management positions as well, they've fallen into things a little bit by accident sometimes. So they've tried something on their training contract, a seat that they maybe knew nothing about, and they've kept an open mind, and they've done that. And that's what they've ended up going into. And I think I wish I'd known that when I went into my training contract, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I thought that maybe I was lacking in some way by not having that, you know, that overriding sense of this is where I fit or belong in the firm or which team or whatever. But also because it's this thing of just trying new things out. And when you hear about, you know, there's an opportunity to experience this area of law or a certain seat or whatever, rather than to fear it, it's to go in and think, well, this could be a really great opportunity. And towards the end of my training contract, I suppose I had an epiphany, and I realized this a little bit. And that's why I put my hat in the ring to do insolvency, which was at that time, it was a bit of a niche area. No one really knew much about it. And actually, it was a great opportunity because it was a growing team, really nice people there, a really interesting team as well. I mean, I would say that, but I think the work is really interesting that we deal with, and it's gone on to be a great thing. So I think that would be my suggestion. Go in with an open mind, and you're not going to be judged for that. It can actually be a really positive thing. So I think at that point, I'm going to hand over.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ariana Griffiths. I'm a partner in the medical negligence team in the London office. Unlike some others, I didn't actually train at IM. I qualified and trained and qualified at a specialist firm called Alexander Harris. I qualified in 1999. I became a partner in 2002, and I was part of the merger between Alexander Harris and Irwin Mitchell in 2006. I started my own team when we came over to Irwin Mitchell, and grew that team from scratch through external hires, but also trainees qualifying into the team, and now have a pretty big team of 18. I sit on the Wellbeing Committee in the London office, and you've already heard from Claire England, who chairs the committee in London. There's been a real appetite in the office for a few years now to ensure that we look after our people, but also ourselves, and it's been great to see how this has developed over time. I am one of the mental health advocates and have completed the Mental Health First Aid England course. So I've been contacted periodically by other colleagues, not just in my own team, but also in other divisions, seeking some help with signposting and sometimes just to chat about their circumstances. The personal experience that I wanted to talk to you about today is something which took me a while to think about, not necessarily presenting on, but sharing with others. And it is actually something that has been shared nationally within IM, because I think it's really important that we try to break down the stigma attached to, or that can be attached to, wellbeing issues. So by background, so I work in litigation. Medical negligence is never a dull moment. We never have a quiet day. We don't really have peaks and troughs like in some transactional teams. The cases themselves can be really challenging, but we're dealing with a really emotive area of law, because we are often dealing with cases specifically involving, babies with brain damage, or you may be dealing with a case involving the premature death of family members, etc. And no amount of compensation is ever going to make up for what's happened to those individuals. And as a result of that, it is important that we can empathise with the individuals that we're representing, but it isn't always easy, and you have to go some way to trying to compartmentalise what you're dealing with and try and keep things a bit separate. And you'll see a bit of that in the example that I'm going to go on to in a minute. A little bit of good stress is a really good thing. So it gets the adrenaline going. It just it creates a real buzz, but it's just really important to try and make sure that you don't have too much. And one of the things that I really liked was the analogy that was used by the trainer who trained us when we did our Mental Health First Aid England course. And he used this analogy of a stress bucket. And he explained that, if you imagine and can visualize a bucket, then all of your levels of stress go into the bucket. But there comes a point when it starts to overflow, and that's where you need to find ways to try and relieve that pressure. So, there's only a certain amount of stress that we can all as individuals cope with, and it's important that we try to find ways and means of going easy on ourselves and getting help when we need it. So there are so many things in litigation that can affect well-being. Obviously, you've got a never-ending task list. It feels like you've got competing deadlines. As a trainee, you might be working for more than one individual. You need to make sure that any delegation that's given to you is clear, and you look after yourself. And there may be certain other things that might impact on well-being outside of work, so your health, finances, or indeed any other personal circumstances. So I'm a big believer in talking to people about how you're feeling, and I've always felt this way. Communication is really important. Sharing concerns with colleagues or line managers, making sure that if you are more senior, but even if you're not, that you're actually approachable to others. So if they want to come and talk to you, being aware of behaviours, helping to spot the signs that someone is struggling. So if from my perspective as a line manager, I might be looking out for those who are working really long hours. The tone of someone's emails might give me an indication as to how they're feeling, making sure that you're having these sort of regular catch-ups with individuals. But when you ask people how they are, not just paying lip service to it to say how are you, you actually do it with some meaning, that you're really listening to people and you're interested in that individual. So we have monthly meetings with people in our teams, but obviously we've been catching up with people much more regularly since March this year, as you might expect. So we have weekly catch-ups with people, coffee breaks, just to try and get to know people. And I've actually found that I've got to know people in my team much better, because you're taking time to just have half an hour with them each week, just to chat about non-work, sometimes work related, but more often than not non-work related stuff. And that really does give you an opportunity to get to know people more than you would do if you're just passing in the corridor and just saying hello quickly or standing by a printer, etc. So it's really a good way of trying to get to know and make sure that we're aware of how team members are coping, because it isn't always obvious. My personal experience dates back to 2006, and it relates to a particular client of mine at the time who had a psychiatric injury, really challenging situation for him because of his psychiatric issues, and I was very much aware of this. And it wasn't just this case in isolation that had this effect on me. There was a lot going on at the time. I'd just come out of a long-term relationship. I was single, living in London, in the city, really close to the office. And some might say, wow, you know, that's what a great experience. And it was. But it also meant that I was really close to the office. I had a very short commute to work, and I didn't really have a lot of downtime. So I found myself working much longer hours than I certainly do now. And that, unbeknown to me at the time, was having an effect on my well-being. And what happened in this particular situation was that the client had lost his job. He had a wife who was a solicitor who was constantly, understandably, trying to, you know, ask and suggest certain ways forward for the case that I was dealing with at the time. So advice was always challenged and questioned. And as a result of that particular case and all the other things that were going on externally in my life, I found that I started to exhibit signs of physiological signs of stress. So I had some chest pains. I was working really late. I wasn't sleeping very well. My friends had started to become concerned about me at the time. And one evening, very late, I was reading my emails very late at night, which I would advise you not to do. But I had received an email from my client's wife, who had said that she was worried about her husband, that he was struggling to accept the advice that had been given at the time, and that he disappeared. And she had put in this email that she was so worried about him, and that if something had happened to him, that essentially she was pointing the finger at me. And you can imagine how I felt at the time, on top of everything else that was going on. You know, receiving something like that was really, really difficult for me to take. So what did I do about it? Well, that night wasn't a great night for me. So I read the email at 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that, and I just was unable to sleep. And the next morning I got up, I showered to get ready for work, and as the water just hit my head, I just crumbled. And you know, and I couldn't stop crying, basically. And it was just one of those difficult situations. And I rang my line manager at the time, shared the situation with her. She could see that I had been you know, getting more and more stressed over a period of time, and I shared it with her. She popped round for a coffee and we just talked about stuff, and I ended up not long after that, I was planning on having a decent break over Christmas. It just fell before Christmas, so I took a bit of extended leave and had a long holiday to try and just have a break from things and just approach things in a different way. But I think what was really important was being able to speak to somebody who understood what it was like and who actually cared about what was going on, and stepped in to help out to relieve some of the pressure. So I think I'd say, you know, the situation now is very different. That was, you know, it was to a degree, you know, an isolated incident. Thankfully, I haven't had any more incidents since that date, but it has enabled me to take a step back and look at how things are going, and, you know, recognise myself if I'm getting, you know, quite stressed. And I think the struggles I have now are, you know, finding the time to look after myself. I work full time. I'm married. I have 2 young children now. I don't at the moment, since March, have the downtime that you can get when you have a commute, because of course I don't live in the city anymore with a family, so I live a bit further outside. So at the moment, because of COVID and the lockdowns and working from home since March, essentially, you know, I switched straight from finishing work at the end of the day to going into mum mode, and that can mean that, you know, it's difficult to take time to look after yourself, and you have to try and make the time to do that and make sure that you get the balance right. And after going on maternity leave with my children, when I returned to work, it was great that I was able to start flexing my days, flexing my hours, so that I would work, you know, a day from home. I'd been working from home for part of the week, only a day, since 2000, 2012, 2013, after my son was born, and then after my daughter was born, I started to flex my days a bit more, so that I would start work on some days of the week. I'd start work at 10 o'clock in the morning and then work later in the evening, and other days I would start work early and finish early, and then also have a day from home. So I think we're in a much better place. Wellbeing is so much higher up on the agenda, and rightly so. And as in my role as a partner, what's important to me is that I look after my team. I'm aware of the things that can affect them. We have to be able to adapt and change the way that we do things, and look out for others, and make sure that we are trying to offer and get the right support for individuals if they are under pressure. So the final piece of advice that I'd probably give is just keep talking. It's okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to say no to things. I think over my career, I've probably been a real yes person. You know, if somebody asked me to do something, I would want to go and do it. And then there comes a time actually where you just can't keep saying yes, and you have to take a step back and think about the best way of managing your time so as not to put too much pressure on yourself. So I hope that's been helpful. I'll hand back. I think it's the Q&A next.
Thanks, Ariana. Yes, so that's the end of the more formal presentation, if you will, and it is now time for the Q&A. So if you have got any questions to ask, if you want to type them in the chat, we will try and answer those. We have had a number submitted ahead of the event. And I think probably there are a couple here. Ariana, I'm going to go to you first, if that's okay, because I think they relate to what you were just saying. So one question is, how do you assist those who are feeling isolated, particularly with the lockdown that we are in? And it links to another one, which is, in what ways has Irwin Mitchell facilitated employees' well-being during the pandemic that was different to before? So can I hand over to you for those, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So what we've been doing during, well, since March, since the outbreak of COVID, as I said, we have had wellbeing much higher up on the agenda than ever before. We talk about wellbeing at every given opportunity. We've encouraged all supervisors, line managers to have weekly catch-ups with individuals in their teams. And I know that, you know, speaking in my own experience, having a team of 18, initially I was doing that with every single individual, which takes up quite a long time when you add up half an hour or whatever to catch up with individuals during the course of a week. But it was really important that I did that. And then gradually over time, the supervisors, because I don't directly supervise every individual in my team, so we've made sure that the senior solicitors in the team who have supervision responsibility are doing the same thing. We have weekly team meetings to make sure that everyone is kept up to date with all of the support that's out there and the changes that are in place internally as a result of the outbreak. But it's been really helpful to make sure that everyone's got time to chat about things. We've been really flexible as well. We've encouraged flexibility. There have been so many people, I know from my own experience of having the children, you know, trying to do homeschooling when the schools were all closed was seriously hard. And you know, I was lucky in that, you know, although my husband and I both work full time, we flexed our day so that one of us would do the homeschooling from 9 till 3 and then start work at 3 o'clock and finish at 11 o'clock, and the other one would be, you know, trying to deal with the other child or working during the day. And it was just quite difficult for us to do that, but we made sure that it worked. And for other colleagues, it wasn't always possible for that approach to be taken, so we were flexible to allow people to work shorter hours for a period of time until the schools reopened in September, if that's what the individuals wanted. So it was all about having discussions with individuals to see what would work for them and making sure that as a business we could be adaptable.
Thanks, Ariana. Just looking at some of the other questions that we've had through. I'm trying to link to the same topic first of all. Are there any provisions in place to support trainees throughout their training contract? So I think this one, it's in general we have huge support, and then there's been more specific support that's been put in place as a result of remote supervision more than anything, I would say. So first of all, the trainees are supported in a number of ways, as well as the traditional support that they get from their colleagues, buddies, their supervisor. The early careers, so my team, we've got 2 early careers managers, one that looks after the BLS trainees and one that looks after the PLS trainees. So they have regular catch-ups with the trainees. So they have scheduled ones throughout the year, and then they are available at any time that a trainee wants to speak with them. They can just arrange to talk something through. That could be something specific about their training contract, about a seat that they want to do, or just that they may be struggling with something. So there are a number of people, in addition to the Healthy Mind advocates that we've spoken about. In addition, there are regional representatives. So in each of the offices, there is an early careers sort of dedicated person. So it's a senior associate or a partner in that office who has a keen interest in the early careers space. So that could be with trainees or with apprentices, and they're another form of pastoral support that the trainees or apprentices can go to at any point. In addition to that, from a more technical supervision point of view, it's been recognised that, you know, like most jobs, people that are new on the job often learn through osmosis, through listening to conversations that are going on in the office. And obviously that all got stopped when everybody went into lockdown. So we've put in place a number of additional support for the trainees. So we've done guides for the supervisors. Lots of the supervisors were doing these things anyway, some more than others. So first of all, we surveyed the trainees and asked them what sort of support they were getting, where it was going well, where they felt that they weren't getting the support that they needed, and basically shared these best practices. So these could be things such as, you know, a supervisor having their teams on for, say, an hour or so each day that the trainee could just join in and listen to specific handover documents to make sure that everything was being covered. We put in place specific checkpoints as a minimum that the supervisors would undertake with the trainees. So as I say, some of them, you know, some line managers were doing it anyway, but others it's really helped them provide a bit more structure. As Ariana said, it is time consuming, but it's really important. So we have put those additional things in place as well. So what else have we got? What events took place for Black History Month? So Ariana, I think that's another one for you. Sorry, I'm giving you all of the ones allocated to you at first.
That's all right, no problem. We've had a number of attempts, and we've attended a number of events, relating to Black History Month, but also beforehand. We've got diversity networks, as we mentioned before, with I Am Respect, which covers racial equality. We've also attended gradual recruitment events around Black Lives Matter and specific BAME lawfare. We've also attended the WCAN, the Women in the City Caribbean Network event. And internally, we've held some Let's Talk About Race sessions, which have been facilitated through the I Am Respect leaders, and they've been local events where we've encouraged people from different teams, different divisions and departments to get together and to talk about race, which has been really helpful. So we're just taking away the information that's come out of those listening groups to discuss at board level. It would be great to have Black representation on the Mitchell Executive Board. That's something that we're going to strive towards to try and make sure that we do have better equality. And Claire mentioned, I think it was Claire who mentioned earlier about the book club that we put together. That was there was a specific event for Black Lives Matter. So we had a few months focusing on race and immigration alongside other diversity themes, and there've been over 100 members engaged in that particular activity.
Thanks, Ariana. Just looking at some of the questions that are coming through on the chat. Claire, I think there might be a good one for you there from Fatima, because I know that you're involved as a Healthy Mind advocate as well. So the question there, is there a general recognition and appreciation that factors such as race, gender, sexuality, etc. are intersections that specifically impact on mental health? And how do we specifically accommodate that at Irwin Mitchell? So I'll hand over to you for that one, please, Claire.
Hi, yes, of course. So intersectionality is definitely something that we're really aware of at Irwin Mitchell, and we're trying very hard to be as intersectional as possible in our approach. So there's sort of two streams to that. Every diversity group and also the focus on wellbeing and mental health, tries to bear that in mind whenever they're looking at their approach to how they're supporting people. And we also are having wider conversations within the firm at the moment about how to make everything intersectional. So we have various meetings between senior leadership and also the people involved in the diversity groups and in mental health and wellbeing support as to how to support people who have specific needs, as you've raised. So it's definitely something we're working on and trying to roll it out as far as we can. One of the great things I think about our diversity groups and our mental health support is that we really do listen to everyone. So all colleagues are invited and encouraged to contribute to those conversations. And often, of course, they raise viewpoints that we hadn't been aware of before. So we're working really hard to try and make sure we are as relevant as possible to everyone who works for us.
Thanks, Claire. And then another question that came through earlier, which is one which is I'm going to ask you as well, if that's okay. Do we have any specific measures in place to help LGBTQ plus people in the workplace?
Yes, we do. So I think our diversity groups we mentioned a few times. So I Am Equal is the one that supports LGBTQ plus people in particular, which I'm a member of as well. So it's a general support group in every office and throughout the firm. We have regular meetings where we sort of meet up across the firm and discuss what's been going on, if we've got anything that we want to focus on. We hold events and awareness days, which is open to everyone at the firm and sometimes to external people as well, to encourage people to learn more about some of the LGBT issues. And we share colleague stories, and we have senior role models again. So we have lots of people who are sort of out and proud and will talk about their LGBT plus experience and really role model that to other members of staff. And some of the external speakers we've had have been really inspirational. We had quite recently, we had 2 trans barristers who came in to talk about what it was like being a trans person and working in the law, which was really interesting. We've had lots of those kind of events. We also really try to make sure that our policies are LGBT plus inclusive. So that includes things like our adoption policy, anti-bullying policy, equal opportunities policies. All of those things are looked at through an LGBT plus lens to make sure that people are being supported.
Thanks for that, Claire. Just a question I can see in the chat from Abby, which is probably the one for me to answer, really. Would you suggest being open and honest on your application about any struggles that you may have experienced during your university experience? Is this something that would make you seem more personable to the firm? I think on that one, if it's relevant, what I wouldn't do is look for an opportunity to weave those specifically, or struggles specifically, into your application. I think throughout the whole recruitment process, through the application, the video interview, the assessment centre, the legal work placement, there's ample opportunity for these things to come out in an appropriate setting. So I think on something like your application form, if it's asking for a time when you've faced, so there's a question on this year's application around a significant challenge. So when you faced a significant challenge and how you overcame it and what did you learn from it, if you feel that that is the most appropriate example and you can demonstrate why it was significant to you, then that would be appropriate. So I think it's like any of the questions, really. I think you can definitely feel comfortable that you won't be judged. It won't go against you in your application if you are sharing that sort of information. But I would just be mindful to make sure that the answer that you're giving is the best example that you can possibly give in that situation. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Sorry. Going on to something more general around the training contract. So to Claire and Micah, What's the best part of working at Irwin Mitchell?
So I've unmuted first, so I guess I get to go first. Yeah, so basically, I would say that it's a combination, it's a balance of having the great thing about a full service law firm is that there are all kinds of clients. As I say, there are, you know, from people who've suffered with things like mesothelioma up to big corporations that are trying to refinance, whatever it might be that is your interest. We can accommodate it. And so for me, it's the sheer scale of opportunity. And to give you a practical example, I was in my commercial litigation seat, and I was able to do some work for the legal expense insurance team, which means claims for people that have just got legal expense cover and have got into a, you know, some kind of legal dispute with a neighbour or whatever it might be. So because I was able to do that, I was able to do pieces of litigation that I would never normally have been able to do if it was a multi-million-pound piece of litigation. So if you work for a firm that doesn't have that, you might not be able to get that kind of work. You might not be able to manage it yourself. And equally, you know, if you work for a firm that just does that end of it, then you might not be able to see the big multi-million-pound suits and how they work. So that's probably the best thing, the variety of the work and the respect for the balance of your life, that, you know, you can continue to have a life. I think those are the best things, and the fact that it's, you know, just such a supportive environment, and you know, because we've got clients from all walks of life, we've got people, all kinds of people from all walks of life, and so it's an interesting place to work as well.
Yeah, I'd completely agree about the breadth of work that we can do at Irwin Mitchell. Got great colleagues, it's a great environment, and I also really like that we have a genuine focus on diversity with people who are really committed to it. It certainly never feels like a box ticking exercise at Irwin Mitchell. It feels like people really care about what they're doing, and it's a lovely place to work as a result.
Thanks both. I can just see a question there around dyslexia. What support do we provide for dyslexic trainees? So, like, I think like any protected characteristics, we always give any support that's needed. So we would discuss with the trainees what support they need, whether they need additional time, make sure that their supervisors are aware of that. And if you look in our brochure, one of our current trainees, Darina, has actually, she's been involved in a discussion around her dyslexia and how, you know, how she's seen it as, you know, not as a disability, but just something that makes her different, and how she manages that. So I know that we've tweeted about it. It's certainly in our Twitter feed. There's detail, as I say, in our brochure as well. So I would say have a look at that and see what Darina said about you know, being a dyslexic trainee at Irwin Mitchell. Back to some other questions. So one for you, Tom. What's your opinion on the O-shaped lawyer model and the significance of the human touch?
Thanks, Marissa. Yeah, so I suppose just so I won't assume that everyone knows what the O model is, so I'll just jump back a bit. So this is essentially in relation to what academics have sort of looked at you need to be a lawyer, and there's been three different types of models really. So historically, everyone looked at something called the I model, which is that you just look at the academic side of law that you get in your undergraduate course. And particularly, I think in America, they pretty much just an academic overview and then they jump straight into being a training contract position. I'm not sure there's something out there the same as the LPC. So in more recent years, there's been a move away from that to something called the T model, and that acknowledges that as a lawyer, you can't just know purely what section of the Act something is in. You have to be able to put some context around it on the case. You have to understand what your client needs. You have to give a more holistic answer to it. And I think that's probably not something that would come as a surprise to UK law graduates or people looking into a career in the law. I think it's something that it's been in place for quite a few years. The O model, that then looks beyond that, and that looks at the real qualities that you need as a lawyer beyond just, I suppose, raw academic intellect and understanding how to solve a puzzle. So what it looks at more is your attributes, and it acknowledges that there's a human element when you're dealing with any kind of legal issue, whether it's a sort of a low value claim acting for a layperson, which Mika alluded to before, or whether it's something like a huge high value clinical negligence claim or a very high value corporate transaction. You need a human element to that. So the O model is looking at whether you're optimistic, whether you're an opportunist, whether you're original, whether you're open, and whether you take ownership of things. Now, I think it would be fair to say to those of us on the call from Owen Mitchell, we probably take that for granted already, because that's already really what we've been doing since certainly the whole time I've been at this firm. It is really this sort of the human element of it. And it's not doing it as it's some sort of, I don't know, like an easy selling point. It's genuinely, when you're dealing with clients, it doesn't matter where they're from or what they're doing, they're humans. You're not instructed by a robot or a machine. You are dealing with human beings at whatever level they are, and you need to be aware of that. So we need people who have those skill sets, and we recognize it. And I think some of the legal profession has not been in that sort of headspace, and some of them are coming into it now in terms of some of the larger firms. But it's something Owen Mitchell's been doing for a long time. So it might sound a bit contrived or whatever, but I think we're one of the firms that has been sort of following this O model for many, many years. And in fact, our values, which are sort of ingrained in all of the reviews that we have on a monthly and annual basis, so performance reviews, we look at that as a specific quality because it is something that we all need. So yeah, very much, I think it's a sensible theory, and I think it's right, and we do follow it.
Thanks for that, Tom. Just looking at the questions that have been coming through, how has Owen Mitchell supported the BAME and particularly Black colleagues in light of issues such as the disproportionate effect of COVID on minority groups? I think, I don't know whether anybody else wants to comment on this one, but my response on this was that they have protected everybody straight away was working from home. Nobody has been under any pressure to go into the office. We've been advised that if we want to speak to our line managers and wish to continue working from home, even beyond the pandemic, if that's felt appropriate, that we can do that. But I think just overall, it's been very clear that the priority has always been to protect our colleagues, because it may be that people have underlying health conditions as well that puts them at higher risk. And I don't think there's been anything specific for certain individuals. I mean, people can correct me if I'm wrong on this. It was more a general understanding that all of our colleagues are important, and the priority is to protect your health and stay at home. I don't know whether Ariana or Tom have got anything to add to that.
No, we've just, as you say, we've just allowed people to talk to their line managers about their specific circumstances. So we've adapted to every individual, really. And if there's absolutely, you're right to say that there's no pressure on anybody to go back to the office. And even with the office bubbles that have started more recently, it's been a voluntary situation, and there's so few people going in a very sterile and clinical environment. We've just tried to make sure that there's absolutely been no pressure whatsoever for any individual to go into the office, and everyone has been, the vast majority of people have been working from home.
Thanks, Ariana. Another question here, more general question. Would you always advise applying for the legal work placement in conjunction with the training contract instead of applying for the training contract outright? Absolutely. The main thing is that it gives you a real insight into the culture of the firm. So, when you are applying for your training contract, do really research the different firms. I would say not to apply to more than a handful of firms. Ensure, as Micah said earlier, that you really identify with them, and you can be yourself there. I think is really important. But the legal work experience, as I said, it gives you a chance to try us on. It also lets us see more of what you're about. So you'll probably be on your best behaviour on the assessment centre, even though we say relax and enjoy yourself. You look at us at the start as if to say, are you kidding? But we do, at the end of the assessment centre, people do say that, you know, it is a really good event. We do our best to bring the best out of you. But the 2 weeks in the business is really what we're about. It enables you to really shine and show that you can be yourself, that you can be the sort of candidate that we could put in front of a client. So that's why at Irwin Mitchell we blind screen applications. We don't look at your individual academics. We don't look at what university you went to, what degree you've got, or what grade you've got. We do look at that after the whole recruitment exercise is finished to see actually where were candidates coming from. Was it, you know, us targeting particular areas or ethnic backgrounds? Has that come through in our application? But with regard to individual offers, we can't see anything like that. So it really is about you being able to come in and be yourself and show what you're about. So if you are able to do the 2 weeks, then absolutely do that. But we do recognise that not everybody can. You know, some people, if you can't go abroad and there's nowhere else to take your holidays, then taking 2 weeks off to come and work at Irwin Mitchell might not be a bad thing. But we also recognise that not everybody can take that time off. People have caring responsibilities, etc. So if you are unable to do the 2 weeks, that's absolutely fine. You will be you'll be assessed on on your performance at the assessment centre. But if you are able to do it, I think it's beneficial for both you and for us as well. So hopefully that answers that one. Timmy, you're asking loads of questions here. Let's have a look. Do you think working virtually has significantly changed how you feel about working within the firm? Do you still feel just as close with colleagues and as engaged with your work and clients, even though you cannot have in-person meeting anymore? So who wants to take that one?
I'm quite happy to take that one if you would like. So I would say that it's actually, in some ways, in odd ways, it's kind of brought us closer together, because if you like, the geographic barriers have completely disappeared. So I'm doing a seat at the moment which is in Gatwick. Ordinarily I wouldn't have been able to think about that seat because of the commute involved, and because obviously I need to be here for my family. So in some ways it's diminished that gap, and it's made us very agile. I meet daily with the team that I work with, so I'm able to meet with the office team on Friday mornings. We have a coffee morning. On Thursday evening there's a get together for the London office. So I'm probably able to meet more people on a more regular basis socially and for work than I would have been able to otherwise. And I work very regularly with a solicitor who works in the Leeds office. So I think it's made us much more agile, and we've adapted really well. All of the equipment came in really quickly. We were at home straight away during the very early stages of the pandemic. We were home, we got the equipment, we started working together. And I mean, it would be nice to be back in the office now and again to see everybody. It's just not possible at the moment. So I think that we've turned it to our advantage, and that's always, that's the sort of pioneering value that we actually live and drive through the business. We just turn the situation to our advantage, and we now work better as a team.
Thanks for that, Micah. Claire, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Hi, yeah, I think I'd agree that being able to speak to people across different offices has been really helpful. I was a bit worried about what it was going to be like during lockdown, because obviously moving seats into a new team that you didn't know at all when you hadn't met them in person was slightly odd, but everyone's been really lovely, very sort of keen to have the online meetings and video calls and things to make sure we've all fitted in. So yeah, I'd say it's certainly not the same, but it's not worse, it's just different.
Thanks, Claire. There's a question there around, is there any support given to international trainees or employees, e.g. around visas and immigration, homesickness, etc.? Visas and immigration, not really. The rules change so often that all we can say is that we do have a Tier 2 sponsorship licence. We have sponsored, we've got a trainee in the London office that we sponsored. She's originally a Canadian, originally a Canadian, she's still a Canadian, but she's a Canadian national, and we provided her with a sponsorship license for her training contract, and she's still with us. I think she's 2 or 3 years PQE now. So in that respect, yes, we do welcome applicants from international, from overseas, but with regard to the immigration, it changes so often that we just say that you need to make sure that you are eligible. That's as far as we go. With regard to homesickness, I think that's something that all of the trainees can suffer from to varying degrees, just like at university as well. People suffer. So we have moved trainees. We had one trainee 1 year who was actually from Ireland, and she'd originally gone to one of the offices in the north because she had family in that area, and then the family moved back to Ireland, and she was really homesick, and her boyfriend was in London, and she ended up qualifying down in London, and again is still there 2 or 3 years later. So what we do, the business need always comes first. There needs to be a business case for any individual to be working in that team, obviously from a financial point of view. But what we do is we encourage you to be honest and have conversations with Natalie and Georgina, who are the early careers managers, who have a view of the national picture, and they will do everything they can, to accommodate you, wherever we can, because well-being is so important, and we don't want a trainee being really unhappy if it's something that's within our gift to be able to to address. So definitely we'll do what we can to help you. Going over to, there's a question there for Tom and Oriana, and I think as we're wrapping up anyway, it probably links to the question around what makes the firm unique. So Tom and Oriana, what's kept you at Irwin Mitchell?
Yeah, happy to go first. What's kept me at Irwin Mitchell? I would say the opportunities the firm gives people based purely on merit. So if you are able to sort of show in your output that you're doing good work, you'll go far here. There's no other things that they expect of you. There's no thing of your face doesn't fit at the firm. There's no thing of sort of preconceptions as to what a leader looks like in a firm, and because of that, I think a lot of people here have had a very fulfilling career and been able to do things at this firm and progress quickly. And maybe there's a feeling that at some other firms they wouldn't have had that same opportunity. So I think it's purely around opportunity and being supported to do things around this, and rather than being left to your own, to make your own way. It's having a very supportive collection of colleagues around you at peer level and above, who they want to see you succeed and they want to help you on that journey. So that would be mine, I think.
Hi, thanks, Tom. I think our ability to adapt to so many external challenges, market forces, the challenges that we all face, we've been great at, innovation, and I think from a personal perspective, just the opportunity to play to people's strengths and career development opportunities for individuals, the flexibility, but above all, obviously this is very personal to me, but I absolutely love what I do. I love helping the families that I represent, and I've always been fascinated in medicine. In fact, I was torn between medicine and law to begin with, and opted the legal route. So it was a great opportunity for me to be able to do a bit of both, as it were. But ultimately, I still to this day, I enjoy going to work every day.
Thanks, Oriana. I can see we're running out of time now, and there are some questions on here which are more in relation to the training contract application process. So I think if I wrap up by just plugging, we've got another event that I think would be useful for people, which is on the 2nd of December between 1 and 2:30, and it is all around the training contract application process and how to make an impact, and give some hints and tips on that. So if you go on to the Irwin Mitchell Early Careers website, you can actually register for that event. So I would encourage you, if you've got any questions around that area, to come along to that event. So I think we've finished now. So all I would say is thank you to everybody for your time, for your questions and your interest, and thanks to the panel for supporting this. So good luck to everybody going forward. Thank you.